Welcome to the Passive Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast with your host, Andrew Keel. This is the podcast where you can get the education you need to invest 100% passively in the highly profitable niche of mobile home parks.
Welcome to the Passive Mobile Home Park Investing Podcast. This is your host, Andrew Keel, and today we have an amazing guest in Mr. Ian Tudor of the Archimedes Group. Before we dive in, I want to ask you a real quick favor. Would you mind please taking an extra 30 seconds and heading over to iTunes to rate this podcast with 5 stars? This helps us get more listeners, and it means the absolute world to me. So thanks for making my day with that review of the show. All right, let's dive in. Ian graduated from Virginia Tech with a major in finance. He began his career in the financial development program at Genworth Financial. He then joined Parkway Properties, a Class A office REIT, as a member of the investments division. During his tenure at Parkway, Ian underwrote over $1 billion in acquisitions and dispositions. Ian left to start Archimedes Group with Ryan Narus, who was on a previous interview. They're based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. They have sourced, participated, and closed over $20 million in deals since 2016. And currently, Ian focuses on growing and operating the portfolio. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm a huge fan of the work that you do and what you've been able to build over the past few years yourself. So it's always great to catch up.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. It's fun to communicate and stay up to date with you guys as well. And we're kind of the young group in this mom and pop industry. So it's fun to bring that new life.
Absolutely.
Well, let's jump right into the questions, man. Can you tell us, your story and how you got into manufactured housing? I think everyone has like a unique path, and it seems like just based off of your bio, you have some pretty cool stepping stones.
Yeah, so I got into real estate at 23. I had a mentor when I was at Genworth who kind of showed me the world. He saw the world a little bit different than other, I would say, middle managers. And, he was the first, I remember he was the first time in like 2013 or 14, I saw like $1 million on a screen. He had like $1 million+ in a stock trading account that he had. And I was like, oh, this is so crazy. And so he saw the world a little bit differently, was really interested in investments, had some real estate that he owned in the Northeast. And then he bought a house in Hawaii that he was like Airbnb-ing back several years back. And so it spurred my interest of like, oh, this is kind of interesting. So I went on this deep dive of real estate, starting to meet with a lot of people. And I was in Richmond at the time and just kind of found that real estate was something that I was interested in. And so I bought a house at 23 and kind of started house hacking, I guess is the term they do now, had roommates and lived basically rent free. And I just realized that real estate was more of an interest for me than corporate finance. So I started to look for opportunities and landed in Orlando, working with a great company in Parkway, and was really immersed into how commercial real estate and institutional real estate played out. So I did a lot of models, worked on, $500 million portfolio deals, and did some really cool acquisitions and dispositions as an analyst, kind of, the Excel monkey behind things, and just like kind of coordination of a lot of large transactions, which was pretty cool. But I always had this interest of wanting to build my own thing and just not be reliant on anyone out, and a path to wealth. And so I started to look for single family homes within Orlando. And at the time, it just felt things weren't priced. I looked at flipping houses, and then I looked at actually buying individual mobile homes because I said, oh, this sounds fascinating. It's lower capital requirements and pretty reasonable returns. But the guy who I was living with at the time, who worked with me at Parkway, he's like, why don't you buy the entire park? And it put off a light bulb. And at that time, I purchased Frank and Dave's just informational packet. That was in 2014. Was looking to start a company. So I was trying to start a company with him, and it didn't really go where I expected. So I still played with the idea, started looking for other investment opportunities, and Ryan and I reconnected in 2015. I pitched him the idea kind of middle of 2015 after he suggested maybe we go into business together, and it just stuck. And so that's, really where that grew. It was a lot of circumstance and, just investigation. And I didn't really, I would say, seek it out. I kind of just stumbled upon it. And then that idea, we just watered it and it continued to grow into what we have today.
Dude, that is so awesome. And I love the fact that you were in Orlando here. I'm in Oviedo, which is a suburb of Orlando.
Right.
And around that same time is when I was looking into mobile homes, and I was doing Lonnie deals, like buying individual trailers. So in another life, right? Like we could have met in 2015 and done some deals together or something. That would have been crazy.
It's funny. There's actually a lot of players out of Orlando now that I kind of spent some more time there. Well, when I did, and my investment partner is down there now, and I told my buddy about mobile home parks, and now I'll connect you with him, but he now has 300-400 lots in the past 2 years that he's been able to put together in Central Florida. So and then there's several other operators that spun out of that. So I never really realized how many players actually came out of Orlando. So I don't know what you guys are doing down there, but something's working.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of really nice parks, the 55 and older amenity rich parks. And, I don't know, maybe that just attracts people to the asset class or something. But Ian, tell us, what has been the toughest hurdle for you in the business?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple. One is Ryan and I very early on were very hands-on in a lot of ways. And I think the struggle for us was just always determining when to hire someone, when to do it yourself. Like delegation has been a little bit harder. So I think that's, in some ways, that might have capped our growth to some extent, just because we always felt that, we wanted to have a handle on a lot of things, but there's levels of growth as you're going through this business, as I'm sure you've experienced as well. So as you're growing quite rapidly. And so just kind of shedding your old ideas to embrace new ideas of what things need to happen. And at different stages, certain mindsets are more important than others. It's taken us some time to embrace those. And now that I'm sitting where I am today, I start to see that as just, vital to make sure that you're going up the staircase the right way and kind of getting to that next level of growth, because the things you do at 100 lots and even 200 lots is way different than 500 and 1,000, 2,000, as you continue to scale.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And, back when it was just a 300 lot, portfolio, you wear many hats, you're doing a lot of the things yourself, from taking the trash out here in the office to, climbing under homes and changing out water valves, which I've done a few times. So at this stage though, when you get, above, I don't know, over around 1,000 lots, it's a completely different animal, and it's all about delegation and systems. And that's been a hurdle for us as well. So I'm with you there. Ian, what do you think is the most important things that passive investors, we're talking limited partners here, what do they need to look out for when investing into mobile home parks? Like the most important?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things to consider, but the biggest thing I see is, the ability to capital raise from someone and operate. Those aren't necessarily the same skill sets. And so you can be a great capital raiser, a great brand, but the person who's actually doing the work on the operations isn't necessarily the same person and requires a wildly different personality at times. So I see a lot of these larger funds, and after speaking with some of the LPs, and just I realized the story and the narrative doesn't necessarily equal the results of what they're actually seeing within the community progress, and just making sure that they have systems and people in place. And it's usually not them doing and making sure that those deals are getting kind of turned around the way that there should be. It has to be relatively strong, or at least it should have some track record of having several successful turns, just because buying a deal is one thing, but as turning around or bringing in 30 homes is it's a monumental task. And the person raising the capital usually isn't the person doing all that as well. They're checking in, but you probably want dedicated people to do that, because people underestimate how much work it actually takes to, run mobile home parks.
That is an amazing point, and I can't believe that hasn't come up on our show yet. Like the fact that raising capital in its own sense is a very interesting task, right? Like it's more marketing and talking and more kind of like a sales role, right? And then the operations side of things is, it needs to be very organized and system oriented and people oriented and hiring. And you're exactly right. To make that all work is very difficult. So I agree with you. It takes a team. It takes the right talents, from different people. And we use a personality assessment. You guys probably use something similar. And, it just helps us kind of identify from a high level, hey, what is this person going to be good at? Is this the right role for them? So the one we use is called the predictive index. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, we personally don't do personality assessments, but it's actually not a bad idea because through hiring several people now, several things we find 6 months later of like strengths and weaknesses that we didn't necessarily see at the front end. And then that, just gives you a broader understanding of where they might be stronger than less. Like we have one manager, she's great for a lot of things. But one of the things she doesn't really like confrontation. So like keeping yards clean is just a little bit more of a struggle because it incites a lot of like just anxiety to actually go confront something about someone. And so having that information is super useful because otherwise you're going to be stepping in to, fill those gaps.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Ian, what does the perfect mobile home park look like in your eyes and why?
Yeah. So, one thing that Ryan and I have found just through the space is we found a niche within this space that I would say a lot of people probably maybe haven't considered. And the thing that we like is we like larger metros. We've done some experiments in some more rural markets, and we like strong metros. So we're really invested in Charlotte, Greenville, and Knoxville. Those are kind of our markets that we play in. And we find that when you have large amounts of park-owned homes, usually, the nicer, the better, in the park, with a reasonable size between 30 and 70 units. Obviously, if we could have 100, we'd love that too. But we find between the 30 and 70 units within our strong MSA, reasonable home quality, those are our favorite parks. And people don't understand why. And it's because it allows us to dictate where lot rent goes. So for us, if someone's $200 below market rents, Ryan and I don't really subscribe to the idea of jacking someone's rents $200 in a year. Like it's really hard from us from a kind of being like an empathetic standpoint. Like we've never done that. It's just something we don't really subscribe to. People obviously more than willing to do that. Run your business how you please. But what we find in mobile home parks with all park-owned homes is you can set the lot rent at market much quicker than, moving someone over 4 year time frame, $50 a year to get to that $200 when that market might have moved again, than for us to sell off park-owned homes and basically hit our mark in year 1 or 2, and we can refinance much quicker. So it allows us to multiply our capital faster when we buy parks that are mostly park-owned home. That works well though, because we're relatively tight geographically. If you had, 10 of those parks in 10 different states, that's really hard to manage, obviously.
Yes.
So it, again, it's like our strategy is very dialed in. It just allows us to operate on those where, we can turn a park like that around in a year, and pull out a ton of equity relatively quickly.
Yeah, that's big. There's only been a couple other investors that we've spoken with that like the park-owned home model. And I think you bring a really good point. You're in top metros and they're close together. So you probably can, use the same contractors over and over again and build those relationships where, when we buy a park that's outside of our current footprint, we got to rebuild relationships from scratch. So it's definitely, you're taking more risk when you got a bunch of park-owned homes, but if you got the same guys, that makes a lot of sense. So that's really interesting. What common mistakes do operators make that you see, through your coaching and speaking with newer operators and so forth?
Yeah. So Ryan and I, we started a mentorship program about a year ago. Had about 30 students gone through it, give or take. And I say working with quite a few iterations of people kind of coming into this space, I think several people don't necessarily dig deep enough on like where they fit in the space. They're like, oh, I want mobile home parks. And they list all the reasons why people love mobile home parks. But that doesn't really get you to the core reason for why you're buying mobile home parks. I see a lot of people buy it for the same reason everyone else is, and that's okay. But I think it's more important to have a personal strategy and start to reverse engineer what you're trying to get to. What I find is a lot of people kind of just mirror other people like yourself. Like you are unique in the way that one, you have the work ethic, the personality traits, as well as the, just overall vision to do a massive company. I actually don't think a lot of people have that, like that nice combination of all those things, but they say they want to, but then their work doesn't match that, or they don't have the, willingness to go through the things that you've gone through to get that. And so what I find is most people actually need a lot less units to actually find their happy place, which is kind of fascinating because most people I find are actually, could be perfectly happy with a few partners and only own 150 lots instead of trying to go to the moon with 10,000. And that actually makes the goal much more achievable, and they actually find more happiness and fulfillment with doing that because they actually don't love the business. They just love the idea of what the business can give them, which is usually time and financial freedom.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And a lot of people that I speak with that are newer operators, it's like, hey, what would just $3,000 a month of extra cash flow do for you? Like it doesn't have to be $30,000 a month, right? Like what would just $3,000 a month do for you? Would that change your life? And most of them are like, yeah, that would do quite a bit. And if you reverse engineer that down to the number of lots you'd need, it's actually not as many as most think. So that is a very good point for all new operators out there that are thinking of getting into the space. I think that is really important to look at up front for sure, because not all people are willing to sacrifice cash flow for the sake of growing your property management company, which has been an ongoing thing since day one for me. And, that's I just listened to Ryan's podcast recently about, what they don't tell you about 1,000 lots. And he brings a lot of good points to the surface there. So that was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, as you've witnessed yourself, I mean, you're further along the journey than we are in terms of, scale of company. And the thing that we find just fascinating is people want the end result, but the work to get there is actually, it's a lot. Like you can't even like think through all the things that go wrong, even just like small, last year we had, 4 homes get burnt down. 3 of them were arsons that our residents were mad at us. And so then it's just like, and that's a small issue compared to, some of the things we got to. And I'm sure, once a week you have something, you're just like, man, I did not expect that to happen, And so it's just, you always have to be on. And I don't think everyone needs that. I don't think everyone needs that. And having that self-awareness is so important. I think that also makes better owners too, because I've seen a lot of larger operators that went big. They're no longer here with us. And their partnership fractured because I think they're chasing the wrong thing. Yeah,
no, that's a very, very important part. Let me ask you this, Ian, what does the business look like as we, thrust forward through 2021 and into the future? What are the major hurdles that the industry could face?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't see the industry going back. I think there's some of the old guys are like, oh, there's this time frame when like parks are going to come back when there's like 10 caps and like this, I think they have this notion that the world's going to come back to the way that it used to be. And I just don't see that. I think the world knows about it. The secret's kind of out in a lot of ways. And so like the idea that deals are going to be wildly cheaper in the future, I think is kind of, I think that's a false belief. I really do. And so the hurdles, so if you're coming into this space, I think it's important to kind of work with the environment that you're kind of going through. Certain states are obviously going to get, I think, more restrictive on, mobile home parks, and it might make it more difficult to just like from a rent control standpoint, especially with, certain governments are more likely to put protections in for tenants than others. So that's going to definitely, I don't see how that would slow down. It seems like, one particular party in particular is going to advance that ball a little bit more than others.
Sure.
So I'd be definitely hesitant in certain states to necessarily grow large, but I'm sure there's a niche there that people can figure out and be relatively successful. And then I think you mentioned the minimum wage, the 15-hour minimum wage. I think that could have an effect too, because as mobile home park can only support a certain amount of employment given the size of these parks. And so if you have a much higher cost burden, it's just going to be harder to get into parks because your expense ratio is higher, and it's just going to, require probably less hiring in some regards, and maybe just, pooling resources to spread over more parks because you can't afford to hire enough people to actually manage the properties that you have. So, I mean, those are just a few of them. I hope long term that owners, I put out a LinkedIn post today, just like owners in general, start working much heavier with city officials, and maybe even there's some lobbying to allow some more mobile home development, because this is a real last affordable solution for people throughout the United States that's not government subsidized. And people kind of seem not to remember that. Like a brand new park today it's obviously going to be a gorgeous asset. You're not going to be bringing in a 1-star asset into development. It's always, it's just like apartments today. They come at the top end. So you're going to have great developments coming. And I would love to see more of that, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that would be a great next step if we can get into some new development again. And, I think it was one of Frank Rolfe's podcasts I was listening to, and he said that back in like the 70s, there was like a really attractive financing where you could build a mobile home park for like 3% down, like an FHA loan type of deal. So, imagine if there was something like that available, what that could do. But yeah, I think you brought some good points to light there. Inflation, obviously, I'm not sure if you guys see it, but we see it every day with the cost of lumber, the cost of, everything is going up right now. It's happening, right? And in markets where there's no rent control, we're able to more easily pass that inflation through to the residents, through rent increases and so forth.
That's a good point.
But like you said, in markets that have rent control, you're not going to be able to do that. You'll be capped at what you can do. So I agree with you that is one facet of the business that to keep an eye out for sure. Ian, so tell me about the Archimedes Group. What is your value proposition and what makes you guys different? Maybe you can also touch a little bit more on your mentorship program.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'd say we're pretty laser focused on what we want and don't want, which we haven't raised a fund. So we don't have like any deadlines to put out a lot of capital, which I think is kind of to our benefit and kind of the reason why we've grown the way that we have. But we focus location first. And the reason why is we feel rent growth is going to be highest there in markets where, again, we're allowed to raise rents to what that rent growth will be. And then second, the thing that Ryan and I have done was, as you have as well, is we've just been in a lot of different scenarios with mobile home parks. So I feel like we've gotten a lot of different experiences. We lived in a mobile home park. We've moved in homes. We've had some RV components. We've done deals of small 25 units up to, several hundred units, quite a few different states and rural markets and urban markets. So it gives us a lot of perspective in terms of the types of deals that we feel we can operate and execute relatively quickly in terms of finding those opportunities. And I guess we have a little bit higher degree of certainty in terms of our ability to execute on those deals, just because we've seen quite a few iterations in, 20 markets or something like that,
Oh, totally. That's huge. And being laser focused with what your niche is and where you see the opportunity in the market. There's so many different niches, like you mentioned earlier. in real estate as a whole, right? But then just in mobile home parks, there's a niche. Like I saw that there's a new fund for mobile home parks that only have private utilities. Like who would have thought, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people at first glance are passing on those opportunities because they don't want to deal with those private utilities. But if you only buy parks with private utilities, you'll know them, and you can probably afford someone that's an expert in those functionings of private utilities. So I love that you guys are laser focused like that. That's huge.
I mean, we don't do a lot of infill either. Some guys are really, like, you do a lot more infill than we do, and some guys are really good at infill. And that's a huge advantage if you have the ability to bring in, say, 50 homes in 2 years or whatever that number is, and have a kind of a whole leasing platform to make sure that those get purchased. Like Ryan and I, that's not our game plan. Like we're not well suited for that. We don't have the systems for that. So the people who can do that, they make really good money, but it's a wildly different cost of capital and a wildly different just business model to make that work. And I've seen, quite a few people have been wildly successful doing that and can turn parks around in 3 years.
Yeah. What you focus on, you get better at, right? And it seems like you and Ryan have done a good job of that. And, with myself, infilling homes and starting a transport company was part of that. And, we've gotten better at it. So totally agree with you, dude. Ian, if our listeners would like to get a hold of you and maybe get more information about your mentorship program or the Archimedes Group in general, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, sure. So just a quick second on our mentorship program. So Ryan and I, what we really do is we have a several month mentorship program for people who are interested in getting in the spaces. People, looking to acquire a mobile home park. Several people in our mentorship program already have parks, looking to buy another one or help with the operations of the park that they're in. And the whole goal of that is to start with strategy and work their way towards closing a mobile home park. So it's all geared towards specific advice to kind of keep people accountable to purchase their mobile home park. And with the 30, we have several people still kind of currently in it, but with the 30 over the past year that have kind of gone through it, 15 of them, I think it's between 10 and 15 of them have put a park under contract and or closed. So it's a pretty high success rate of people actually kind of putting forth offers, getting things under contract, and several of them have closed, which we're really, really excited about. At the end of the day, as mobile home parks in general, the actual business is where the money's made. This is something that we really enjoy, helping other people get into the business. And it's really fulfilling to actually help people kind of make that mental leap to actually get into ownership. In terms of getting in touch with us, Ryan obviously has a podcast that everyone feel free to listen to. It's called MHP IRL. Ryan puts a lot of work into that and has been going on for about 3 years. That's really his passion project, and he's done a great job of cultivating that. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, as well as we have a Facebook group. It's MHP Mastermind, about 2,000 members in it. You feel free to jump in there as well. A lot of people sharing deals and just their thoughts on the industry and helping each other out. It's a free group. We have no real intention with that other than to, allow people to discuss and it's like a watering hole for mobile home park owners. I'm on Facebook as well. Or you could reach out to us on our website, which is www.archimedesgrp.com.
Awesome, man. And yeah, I mean, your mentorship program, I just love that. I wish that was around when I was getting started. A lot of people don't know that I started trying to buy a mobile home park in 2015, but it actually took me 2 years to buy my first deal. And I wasn't ready. It was 2 years and I wasn't ready until 2017 to buy that park. So if you guys could speed that up with that hand holding and providing that community of people to reach out to, and just think about, whatever the cost is, just think about the resources that you guys could give to a mentee, like who to go to for lenders, due diligence help, management scenarios, valuation help. So I just love that. I think that you guys have a great thing going. And then I love the Facebook group. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are already members there. But Ian, dude, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite. It's always great to catch up.
Awesome. Well, that's it for today, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
Hey, are you getting value out of this show? If so, would you mind please going over to iTunes and leaving the show a quick 5-star review? I have a goal of hitting over 100 5-star reviews by the end of 2021, and it would mean the absolute world to me if you could help contribute to that. Thanks ahead of time for making my day with your 5-star review of the show.